The storm above the burned world of Relora rolled like a wounded beast. Dark clouds twisted over the ruined capital, as if mirroring the fear that gripped every remaining citizen. For months their world had been hunted by the Varric, a marauder species that moved from system to system, breaking defenses with strange weapons that tore through stone and metal, alike dot every alarm tower across. The city had gone silent. The military command was ash and rubble. Only a desperate broadcast tower remained, powered by old battery cells that would not last long. A lone operator named Laura stood beside the flickering panels, her hands trembling as she activated the last beacon. Her people had no fleet left to defend them. They had turned to the stars, sending the same message again and again to any listening ally, to any peaceful world, to any force that might hear their call. Help us. But the void answered with silence. Across the hills, injured survivors gathered in what remained of a transport bay. Families huddled together, clutching one another as the sky glowed red. Every living soul felt the same question rising in their minds. Was this the end of Rylerai? Leaned close to the control screen and whispered a quiet plea. She had no idea if anyone on her dying world could hear her, yet she spoke as if the sky itself might decide to answer. She waited for a sign that someone was coming. A starship. A fleet. Anything then the console beeped. A faint signal. Weak but real. Something had answered. She straightened with renewed hope and replayed the incoming message. A voice, distorted by distance and static, cut through the noise. The language was unfamiliar. The tone was calm. It repeated the same phrase 3 times before the line cleared enough for translation. This is Earth. Defense Unit Sentinel-3. We have received your distress call. Hold your ground. We are on the way. Earth. She had heard of it only through stories from old historians. A distant world on the edge of mapped space. A world classified as a death world. A place so dangerous that most species believed its dominant life form could not be peaceful. The stories of humans were contradictory. Some records described them as brave. Some described them as violent. Some described them as unpredictable. But they had answered. Laura hurried to the transport bay to spread the message. Her voice carried across the battered structures as she shouted that help was coming. People lifted their heads. Fear softened. For the first time in weeks, the thought of survival returned to them. As the survivors gathered around her, the ground shook with another explosion. The Varric were drawing closer. Their ships descended like metal insects, landing beyond the ridge and spilling out troops with sharp limbs and glowing masks. The survivors knew they could not withstand them. They prepared for what they believed would be their final stand. Laura clutched a small child, who asked her when the help would arrive. She opened her mouth to reassure him, but could not bring herself to form the words. Then the sky tore open. A streak of burning light cut through the storm clouds. A human dropship broke the atmosphere with a roar. 2 more followed behind it. As the ships descended, their engines created shockwaves that flattened grass and shook loose stone from crumbling walls. The Varric turned in alarm, raising their weapons. The first dropship slammed into the ground with a controlled crash. The doors flew open, and armored figures stepped into the smoke. Humans. Their suits were thick, practical, and coated in a dull color that made them look like walking fortresses. Their helmets glowed with pale blue lights. Their movements were disciplined, fast, and purposeful. At their front marched a tall soldier named Reed. His voice carried through amplified speakers as he raised one hand in a gesture to rally his squad. Behind him, human soldiers moved with flawless coordination. They deployed devices that expanded into portable shields, creating a barrier between the Varric and the Reloran survivors. The Varric charged first. They always charged first, Reed braced himself and steadied his weapon. He fired a controlled burst. The impact threw a Varric backward, as if a giant had punched through its armor. Human firepower lit the battlefield. The Varric advanced with screeching roars, but faltered as humans responded with sharp precision. The survivors of Relora watched with wide eyes. They had never seen soldiers fight like this. Humans did not retreat. They did not slow. They pushed forward with a relentless determination that felt less like strategy and more like instinct. To the Varric, the arrival of humans was a surprise. To the humans, facing dangerous creatures was familiar. Danger was part of life on Earth. Every animal, every weather pattern, every landscape sharpened human endurance in ways most species could barely imagine. On this battlefield, that nature became clear. Humans fought as if they had been born for chaos. Laura guided the survivors behind the shields, while Reed coordinated with his squad. He gave short commands. Each one answered with immediate action. A blast struck near the human position, throwing dust into the air. Reed ran toward the source and dragged a wounded Reloran soldier to safety. He did not hesitate. He did not pause to think about his own risk. It was simply what he did. The survivors whispered in awe. The legends of Earth had never felt so real, but the Varric were not done. A larger ship descended from above, its hull covered in jagged plates. It landed with a tremor and released a towering figure unlike the others. The Varric commander stepped onto the ground with a sharp metallic clank. It raised a weapon that pulsed with a sickly green light. The human line held, but the commander's presence changed the battle. Reed ordered his team to regroup as he analyzed the giant enemy. He knew an opponent like this would require a direct confrontation. He stepped forward. His squad called after him, but he signaled them to maintain the defensive perimeter. Someone had to keep the survivors safe. He marched toward the commander without slowing his pace. The ground was littered with debris, but he moved with confidence. The Varric commander aimed its weapon. Reed dove aside and fired a counterburst that struck the creature's armored shoulder. The alien roared and swung a heavy limb at him. Reed raised his arm shield to block it. The impact rattled through his suit, but he held firm. The battle seemed to slow as the two faced each other. Every survivor watched in breathless silence. To them, this human soldier looked like a force of nature. Reed circled the commander, searching for weaknesses. The creature lunged again, but he slipped past it and aimed for a gap in the armor. His second burst hit the exposed joint. The commander faltered, but it was not enough. The creature regained its stance and swung its long arm toward him with brutal strength. The blow sent him back several steps. He steadied himself, shaking off the force. His visor cracked. His breathing became uneven. Yet he pressed on, because that was what humans did. Reed rushed forward with a final surge. He drove his shoulder into the creature, knocking it off balance. Before it could recover, he ripped open a damaged panel on its armor and placed an explosive charge inside the gap. He jumped back as it detonated. The Varric commander collapsed. The remaining Varric troops retreated, howling in fear. They had faced many species in their campaigns, but none fought like humans. None moved with such defiant resilience. The battlefield fell silent. Reed removed his damaged helmet. His face was covered in sweat and dust, but his eyes were steady. Laura approached him as the survivors gathered behind her. She bowed her head with trembling gratitude. Reed simply nodded. He was not seeking thanks. He was here because someone had called for help. The humans secured the area and provided medical aid to the injured. Portable shelters unfolded from comped crates. Warm packets of food were distributed. Human engineers repaired damaged structures. It felt as though an entire city had been given new breath. Children approached the human soldiers with curiosity. One small child tugged at Reed's sleeve and asked why he had come all this way. Reed answered in a calm voice that no world should face danger alone. If someone asked for help, humans answered. That was the promise his unit lived by. The survivors looked at one another. They had expected help from powerful allies or distant councils. They had never expected help from a world known mostly for its dangers. Yet, it was that very danger that shaped the humans into the protectors they became. For days, the humans remained on Relora, clearing out Varic outposts and helping restore essential systems. Reed and his squad worked tirelessly. They trained the remaining Reloran guards on new defensive tactics. They reinforced the capital's walls. They even restored communication satellites so Relora could reconnect with its neighbors. Laura spent much time observing Reed. She admired the way he spoke to his squad. Always calm, always grounded. He carried himself with a strength that came not from pride, but from a sense of duty. She felt her people were witnessing something rare, a kindness housed within resilience, a quiet bravery that did not need praise. When the final Varic ship fled the system, the Reloran people gathered to honor the humans. They wanted to offer medals or gifts, but Reed declined everything. Instead, he asked only one thing, that Relora never again believe no one would answer their call. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of gold, Reed stood with Laura on a rebuilt balcony overlooking the city. She thanked him once more. He replied that her people had shown remarkable courage. They had endured loss, yet they still stood. To him, that was as important as any victor.